All right, in this next part of the tutorial, I have already come in to Substance Painter and said File, New, and I have selected my wooden elements. If I scroll my middle mouse wheel, you can see there are the UVs. Now the UVs may be different from what you saw in part one because I am re-recording only this Substance Painter portion due to some major changes in the software. All right, I'm gonna come up here, say Edit Project Configuration. Up there you can see there's my wood elements low poly that I have exported out. You can see where I'm referencing them from. Just cancel out of that. Let's go over here to Texture Set Settings. So this will be a nice square set of textures for us. Or actually, it looks like it might be 2:1 aspect ratio. I don't think maybe it is square. I think this might actually be a 1024 by 2048 situation. Let's take a look here. Go to Bake Mesh Maps. We'll change this to 1024 by 2048. And in this case, we are just going to click under high poly parameters. We're going to say just use the low poly mesh as the high poly, and then say bake selected. There we go. And I think, yeah, I think the 2:1 aspect ratio is a better representation of what these textures should look like. So let's return to painting mode. There we go. All right. Give me 1 second. All right, just want to double check in my notes to make sure that they were this 2:1 aspect ratio, which they are, right? So we're definitely going to keep them as 1020/48 or 1024 by 2048. All right, let's switch over to layers. And now we're going to find a wood. So I'm just going to stick with the basics here. And let's see if we have a nice wood. There's this wood. It's American cherry. We could always put that on there. The problem you run into is if you have a wooden beam, you want the grain to go with that. And so you got to figure out how to adjust that. Now, if you're working with just a material, that tends to be pretty easy because there's this properties panel and you can go down there and just type in the correct value, like 90 degrees. And there you go. Now that actually looks like a piece of wood. The wood grain is going in the correct direction. Right? And maybe you don't want the wood to be quite this red. Maybe you want to gray it out a little bit. So you can click on its properties, go to the color, maybe reduce the saturation a little bit, maybe, yeah, make it look a little bit more like wood. And then there's actually, if you keep going through here, there's other properties we could mess with. Attributes, channel mapping. A lot of it depends on what they give us options for. All right. I guess they don't really give us options for how much we want it to be shiny. So we'll just live with what we have here. There are ways to go through and tune those things, but I think it's fine as is, right? So that's one option, right? So then you could take this to File, Export Textures, navigate to the same folder that you normally would, right? Just get in there, select it, and then just hit Export. Okay, so that's one option. You would then go in and look in that Wood Elements folder, and you would see your new textures are sitting in here, and you would rename those. Now, if you wanted to try something else, right, there are other basic materials, but if you wanted to look for a smart material, and this would be only if you had gone and downloaded them, because these are ones I got off of the internet. So there's like this wood chest stylized. If I bring that up, you see there's a lot of different elements inside of it that make it up. So you have two options. One is you go back to 3ds Max and you rotate your UVs 90 degrees and you rebake your textures. so that they are twice as wide as they are tall, right? Or you could go through and inside each one of these layers and elements, figure out what is controlling the grain and what do you need to change in there. Right? So lots of different aspects that you go through and just kind of check, right? Like, okay, I changed that one to 0. What else is there that I may have to change? There's a sharpen, there's a general grunge pass, there's another wood fibers layer. We go down, we find that, and then we're going to rotate that back to 0, right? And so if this was a wood that you wanted, you could go with that. And of course, you could always tune it. If the grunge is too much, we could kind of dial that down a bit. And then we would just, again, go up here, export textures, export them out. Just keep in mind that every time you export, it is going to overwrite what you had before. And so that's another reason to come in here and always be renaming your textures. And so I'm just going to do bn underscore wood elements bc, and then I'll just copy all of that. I'm going to call it, in this case, wood elements 2 bc because I already have a set in here. This, and then we'll change this one to normal, and then this one to ORM or AORM for ambient occlusion, roughness, and metallic. And one of the great things is I now have a variant set of textures that I could use, right? I have the original one, but now I also have this new one. And so I could, if I have an object that utilizes the wood, I could set up 2 different materials in Unreal and have it one object reference one set of textures and another object reference the other. So that's it. That's the Unreal portion of this. We'll close this out, go back to 3ds Max in a separate tutorial.